This episode includes conversations around sensitive topics that may be difficult for some listeners, including addiction, mental health, trauma, suicide, grief, abuse, or other personal challenges. Please take care of yourself while listening, pause if needed, and reach out to someone you trust or a qualified professional for support.
Here we go. Let's do this.
We've got one life, one shot. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? Addicted to Betterment, a podcast to inspire us to keep going, to try something new, to dream, to think big, bigger, to overcome. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Hello again, everyone. Most of us, including myself, spend our whole entire lives trying to become someone. Our society constantly tells us to become, to do, to become this thing. And I know for myself, I'm a goal-oriented person. I wake up every single day and I look at my goals for the day and I think of what I'm trying to accomplish. And then big picture, who am I trying to become? What am I trying to do? We're trying to become successful. We're trying to become accepted, respected. Sometimes we're just trying to become enough. Today's conversation, completely opposite of that. Today, I'm bringing my friend Jennifer Wilkins in to actually talk about unbecoming, not becoming, unbecoming. And before I introduce Jennifer, I want to explain why I'm having this conversation. My wife and I, when we first met, she was so involved and passionate about a non-for-profit that served underprivileged people in downtown Indianapolis. And man, she was just so passionate about it. And through that organization, I met a couple. My friend Jennifer was one of those people that just were, when you meet someone, you shake their hand, look them in the eye, and have a conversation, you know they're different. You know that this person has been through the stuff, they've done the work, and they're here, and what they're doing means something to them. And Jennifer Wilkins, thank you for joining me. I still remember meeting you, and I'll call him King David just for this episode, but your husband, David, who I admire and respect, he's got to be a good guy. His name's David. So we'll start there. But in multiple conversations and interactions, learning where your heart was, learning your story, and then following your journey as you've experienced success and climbed corporate ladders. And then I see on social media you're launching something that stopped me in my tracks. Unfortunately, I'm still a little upset because it's geared toward women. I'm like, hey, what about us guys? But the title jumped out at me and it was said unbecoming. And knowing you, knowing your heart, and me being inspired by this lady that I know and her husband, and I feel like we're brothers and sisters, like we have this community, and I see you becoming all of these things, and suddenly you're releasing this thing unbecoming. I'm like, wait. So we have a conversation. I'll learn what it's about, and I am so excited to share that with our friends today. So Jennifer Wilkins, thank you so much for joining us on Addicted to Betterment today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So Jennifer, I don't know how to even kick this off. So I'll just start. I'm the only thing I know to do is just jump right in. You know, I know some of your story and we'll talk about that a little bit today. You share as much as you want, please. But, I know you suffered from addiction. You suffered from homelessness, and I'm going right in deep.
Go
Like
in.
I'm just jumping in, and then you had corporate success. But I want to go back before addiction, before homelessness, before corporate success, before all of that. Who was little Jennifer? Who was the Jennifer that you were as a child and before you were when you started to become someone?
Yeah, great question. I was fearless. I would say as a little child, and some of this will, we're going to talk about a lot today, right? It's odd that I was fearless in some ways because I was brought up in a pretty fearful environment, but I just had this inside of me, like I was a daredevil. Like there's videos of me as a child at the ocean, and all you can hear is the parents of my friend that I'm Jennifer, don't go that far. Jennifer, get back here. Jennifer, stop it. I was always going to test the limits of where I was. There you couldn't really tell me that I couldn't do something. When I was little, you couldn't tell me I couldn't do something. I believed I could do anything and everything, and I was going to do anything and everything. I was curious. I was loud. I think every single report card I had from kindergarten until 6th grade, when they write notes on your report cards, it was like, Jennifer is an excellent student and she's also a social butterfly, and we often have to move her seat, but that doesn't stop her. It didn't matter where you moved me in the room. I was just going to make friends with that person and talk their ear off too. So super vivacious, energetic, just I was pretty unstoppable. Little Jennifer was pretty unstoppable.
That resonates. I think we can all resonate with that as young kids. You know, one thing I know about your story is that you grew up in a very religious home. I did as well. And when you think about that little girl growing up in a very religious home, what messages did you learn about who you were supposed to be?
Yeah, that's another great question. So, I think as I started to get older, when you're very little, that curiosity and that daredevil spirit, I think it's encouraged as a little child. And then when it starts to show that that's really part of your core, especially, and I'll say this, I can only speak from a female point of view, but I think especially as a woman, when that starts to show that you are loud and you are opinionated and you are meek is not a quality I would assign to myself. But meek is one of the most coveted qualities of a religious woman, right? And so you start to learn, hey, you've got to tone it down a little bit. Like there's things that you need to do to be approved. You need to like maybe not be so big in this area, and maybe your value comes more from how you look and your demeanor and being demure and I don't want to say like being seen and not heard, but I started to learn in that environment that my voice really didn't carry much weight. And this none of this is man bashing. This isn't, but it was more like the man's voice mattered and the woman or girl, young girl was just there to like ride beside, basically, in whatever capacity.
You're getting into the sense part for me, and I'll tell you why. Because when I run across, we'll call them men who feel like they're strong men and lead, and that's their mindset, I see it the opposite. That's weakness, it's insecurity. And it's like when you have to lead like that as a man, it shows a massive sign of weakness. And yeah, that's something I'm very passionate about, which is why we're talking today. Well, so when you talk about that childhood and much of that resonated with me, what were the parts of yourself that were celebrated? So we're talking about, you started becoming and unbecoming, but at that point in your childhood, what parts of yourself were celebrated? What parts of yourself learned that they needed to stay hidden or more quiet, as you described, like toned down?
Um, so something that was said frequently was that I was a diplomat. I mentioned there was a lot of fear in my environments, and not a lot of peace. And I became the peacemaker. And so as long as I could keep the peace and make everybody happy, that was celebrated. Like there was times I was put in situations that no child should ever be put in to create reconciliation or harmony or even a lack of violence, I would say. Um, and it became my job to do that. And that was celebrated. My good grades were celebrated. My accomplishments were celebrated. My looks were celebrated as started to come into my own, and it was I was a high achiever, and so all of that was celebrated.
It's interesting how you describe that. I feel like when we start transitioning into adults, you know, and some of the things we're told we should be or not be, we start losing ourselves. And I had the luxury, you sent me the journal that you've created and excited to share that with our friends. And I took the liberty to go ahead and read it, even though it's very much towards women and not towards men. So still, I'm not just a little passive aggressiveness there. Please forgive it. But I feel like we start losing ourselves, not through rebellion that's sometimes, but through adaptation. We're like trying to, be accepted, be heard, be seen. And we do that to feel that way. It's like we're bad or we're not up to par. We're not enough if we don't adapt in those certain ways. And one of the things that starts creating is performance, this culture of performance, and something some verbiage I'm shifting for myself. So, addicted to betterment, we started this, and we even in our how we used to say our opening, this is for high achievers. And I started hearing this through a different lens because I started thinking, man, high achievers is I don't even know if that's a quality that I want to associate myself with because yes, I want to achieve a lot. I want to do big things and I want to go after life as hard as I can. But I believe when we think of ourselves as high achievers or high performers, we start becoming something that is not who we authentically are, and which comes at a cost. And as I was flipping through your journal, I started becoming aware, keenly aware of that cost of performance. And it's just a strong theme in there. And so I'm reading from the journal right now, and it says many women who have mastered the art of being impressive while feeling emotionally empty. When did you first realize that you were performing instead of living?
I would say I was pretty young. 14 was a really pivotal age for me. A lot changed, and I started to realize at that point that as long as I did perform, everything would be okay, but there was no authenticity to who I was. And so 14 is where addiction really hit hard for me. And it wasn't just, it didn't start off with alcohol or drug addiction. Actually, my first addiction, my first go down this road was an eating disorder that has followed me through my entire life. That goes hand in hand with how women are valued for their looks and having a certain aesthetic, keeping a certain quality, and also me feeling like I had no control of anything that was going on in my environment. And so this was the one thing that I could control. And it didn't start on my own. It started because at 14, I started to go through puberty and I started to change. So I have been extremely athletic my entire life. I started dancing when I was very, very young, 7, I think. Started playing soccer, all of the things. And so was always small. And at 14, I started coming to my own and my body started to change. And I was put on an extremely strict diet where my food was weighed out and monitored. And it was very, very restrictive. And I was like rebellious against it. Like I did not want to be on this diet. And I wasn't stressed out about my body changing, but that was put on me. And so, but then something interesting happened. And as I started to lose weight, I started to gain approval. And so it took on a life of its own because I so desperately craved that validation and that approval. I still wanted to be that little girl that was celebrated. And so I, what started off as what somebody else put on me, I then took on. And I guess that's the point where I learned that I have a really addictive behavior. And if I'm going to do something, I'm going all in. And when I get the result that I want in the reaction, then that's gonna validate me and keep me going. So at 14, started with that. And then by the end of 14, I was also in full blown alcohol addiction because I was so I was performing and so empty. And so I was setting the stage of being the perfect teenage daughter, youth group leader, cheerleader, dancer, soccer player, but empty. And I started to drink heavily when I was 14, like heavily. And I really don't know if there was a day when I was 14 that I was 100% sober, which is wild. And I learned that I could kind of tap out at that point. Like I could detach from all of the pain and all of the what was perceived as like rejection or lack of, and um just hiding from so many other things. And I was obviously living this very duplicitous life at this point. And so alcohol, like the eating disorder got me the accolades that I wanted. And then the alcohol numbed the pain, basically.
You know, Jennifer, as you were talking, it's so sad to me. And I feel like this is so common that you grew up in a very religious home, as did I. And you would think that we would be rooted and grounded in that we are enough and loved as we are. We don't have to perform. We don't have to be. And we're kind of taught with this thing that if you don't measure up, you're not accepted by Jesus, or you're not accepted by your church friends or family or whatever. And it's destructive. It's destructive, and it's often why you see people raised in those environments struggle with that. It's this mindset of I have to be more, I have to be perfect. I can't do this, or I messed up. I'm not enough. I have to perform, and it translates into this constant seeking validation because we want to feel seen and loved as we are. And I come from a place, I working on a men's project, where that's a very big thing with men, is feeling like we're enough. And so I'm thinking of how that shows up with women as you're describing it, and I feel like many women have mastered that, as you said, the art of performing. Did addiction start because you felt like you needed to be more, or do you feel like it was more because you were trying to escape yourself? Like, it was it because you just didn't like who you were, or was it because you were just trying to escape?
I would definitely say escape. So, in one form, my one area of addiction was really about control. And again, like in a very religious environment, women, and I'm saying religious, I'm not talking about relationship with Jesus. And so I want to clarify that. But in a religious environment, women are controlled, right? And so what I saw was women being controlled. So I had no control. And like taking my eating habits and my weight under control. So that was the first part of it, was a seeking of control, but then escaping reality. Using alcohol just gave me such an opportunity to just escape everything going. I had so much going on in my little young brain, and like the best way to tap out of that was just to get a buzz.
Interesting. I want to put an exclamation point on what you said about clarifying between religion and a relationship with Jesus. The reality is that destructive nature that I talked about religion, Jesus also found religion destructive. Just FYI. So I'm going to say a very controversial thing on your episode. I'm hosting you, but the reality is Jesus hated religion more than I do. And a relationship following Jesus's teachings will make you feel enough and loved, not like you're not enough and loved. So I just
And
want
we
to put an
probably could end
exclamation
right
point.
there.
You want to get me fired up, that will do it really quick. So when I met you, man, I still remember Nikki and I having conversations saying, man, that lady is awesome. I mean, I met your story, and it was cool because I met you after you had come out of homelessness, and you had just gotten with your husband, who is awesome, by the way. I'm going to do some work with him that's going to be way bigger than Unbecoming. I'm just going to talk shit for a second, but anyway, did I say that out loud? So sorry. Um, but when I met you, you had come from homelessness, and your story was compelling, and who you are and the impact you were trying to make was compelling. I want to ask, was being homeless or pretending everything was okay and performing, which one was more exhausting?
Oh, for sure. Performing and pretending.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. The point at which I actually became homeless, that was the beginning of my unbecoming, and the beginning of me being able to actually rebuild, because I was able to just, once it's out there, like, okay, now we can heal. Now we can release.
Let's dive into this for a second. I just felt that in my heart when you said that. Man, it was when I became homeless. That's when I started healing. Wow, that's just a powerful thought. You take the lowest point. So take us to that lowest point, if you could, for a second. The moment where you looked around and thought, how did I get here? Tell us about that.
It was a 20-year journey to over 20 years. So, one thing about me is that I was in 5 different, rehabs from 18 until 41. So I went through 5 different programs, and I should mention that in the midst of all this, at 8 years old, I felt a call in my life to be a missionary, and that's really what I wanted to do. I graduated from high school, missed my first semester of college because I was in my first rehab, hopped in 2nd semester, graduated with a degree in Bible. So I went to Bible college, but I saw so much hypocrisy in those years at college in a religious environment that by the time I graduated from college at 21, 22, I was like, I want no part of this. None. And that's when I really went full fledged off the deep end. So at about 22, I think, I mean, I was using like marijuana and stuff from 17. So drinking 14, started using some other like stuff, some like uppers or whatever, 14 to 17. And then at 17, I started smoking weed. And then at 21, I started doing hard, heavy drugs because the minute I graduated from that college, I was like, I'm done. I want nothing. I got through it because again, I performed. But I knew like 2 years in, this is, I didn't sign up for this. This isn't who I want to be. This is a joke, to be honest. Everything you're seeing is like what goes on behind the curtain is gross. That's how I felt. And I wanted nothing to do with it. And so I really went on this journey from about 21 until 41, where I was deconstructing my faith. And I never denied Jesus. Like I always claim, even, I mean, I would be so high on cocaine and trying to like evangelize the person doing a line next to me. Gross, really gross. I'm not suggesting you do that, but I'm saying there was something in me that I always wanted my relationship with Jesus, but I didn't want the religiosity that went with it, the rules and all of that. But I also was very much running from God at the same time because I didn't want the call that I felt on my life. I was like, I'm not doing things your way because I saw what that looks like and I'm not doing that. So I was able to perform. Like what would happen was I would go to rehab, put a little band-aid on my situation. I'd come out, everybody would think I was fixed. I'd keep moving forward. So I was able to like maintain career like jobs. Like I got into the hospitality industry early. And so I will say that in the restaurant industry, it's one of the very few industries you can be in and be like very, very heavily in your addiction and actually thrive. It's almost expected, I would say, like that that's gonna be part of your lifestyle. And so again, I don't want to say that if you are in the restaurant business, you are in drugs and alcohol. I'm just saying that it's accepted, and until you are so deep in where you're like out of control, nobody's really going to point out, hey, you have a problem, right? So I found environments that accepted me, that I was able to thrive in. And so from there, always was in leadership positions and had big plan, but then I would kind of rock bottom and end up back in rehab for a little bit. I never did a faith-based rehab. So I would go to like rehab for a month or two, come out, be okay, get back on my feet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then when I was 35, I went to rehab and for 2 months, and I came out and I stayed clean and sober for 4 years. And during that time, I got married, not to King David. I got married and again, I was like still seeking approval, still seeking. So I wasn't using drugs or alcohol anymore, but I still wanted so desperately to be loved and approved and validated. And so jumped right into a relationship, got married, and stayed sober for 4 years. And then I was like, okay, I'm fixed. I'm better. And I can actually probably have a drink and be fine. Like I am not dealing with the same internal things that I dealt with before. And so like now I can do this in a healthy way. And I think I always kind of left room for myself to do that. And so I started after 4.5 years sober, or just about 4 years sober. I made a calculated decision to drink again. And it only took me 6 months from that first drop of alcohol to be completely strung out on drugs again. And the devil gave me just enough room to hang myself, because like the first few weeks of it, I was like, whoa, this is amazing. I've got a grip on this. I can now be part of society again. I can go out with my husband and have a cocktail. I can go to family parties and have a glass of wine. And I don't have to feel like the outcast. And I don't have to feel like the boring one. I don't have to feel so different. And now I get to socialize again. And everybody sees me as fixed. And then everything started to unravel. And I was just back in that miserable space. And alcohol was definitely not going to get me high enough to get to where I needed to be. So 6 months from that first drink to destroying that marriage, being completely just submerged in what I will then call the darkest 2.5 years of my life. And when I say that, I mean on death's doorstep, basically, by the time I ended up in my last rehab. It was brutal. It was violent. Took me down roads I never thought that I would go down. I couldn't hold a job, but that was the first time ever. I couldn't even hold a job. I lost everything. My marriage, my home, my vehicles, any self-respect, any dignity. I really I had nothing. And just in really putting myself in really dangerous positions with dangerous people, using drugs I had never used before regularly, really never coming up for air. It was horrendous. It was horrendous. A couple of attempts of suicide in that last 2 years, because I was like, this is awful. And I woke up one day and like I said, I was always running from God, but still had a relationship with Jesus. And it was really weird in this last little bit, in that last like 6 months, I would get really, really high and I would listen to worship music. It was bizarre, right? Like I had run from all of that for the longest time. And I started like listening to like Lauren Daigle. I remember that. And like, it just seemed so odd. I'm like strung out, but and it was just like, it was the Holy Spirit, just like, I'm not letting you go, like I'm just not. And so I called my mom up. My mom was still alive at the time. I called her up and I said, Mom, I need to go to church tonight. And it was a Saturday night or Saturday morning. And she was like, well, do you know of a church that has church? Obviously not, haven't been part of the church community in years, but I was like, I do know of one that has a service tonight. And I couldn't drive anymore. I didn't have a car or anything. And she said, all right, I'll take you. I forgot to mention that a week before, I thought my family had planned an intervention for me. I kind of like suspected it. And I flipped out and I told them that if they tried having an intervention with me, they would never see me again. I told them I was fine. I wasn't changing. I was good. I was on the path that, I mean, I like all in, right? So then this Saturday I call her and I say, I need to go to church. So she picks me up, takes me to this church. And I had an out of body experience. I don't even remember what was preached. I couldn't tell you what was preached about. All I know is at the end of the service, the pastor had an altar call. And I always hated altar calls. I hated them. I was like, why do you have to go to the front of the church to like commune with God? That's not how it works. But the next day I'm halfway up the aisle before I even realize that I'm halfway up the aisle. And I kind of come to, and I'm like, and it was that moment. And I was like, you can turn around and go back to your seat, or you can go all in. And I was like, what do I have left? And I walked to the front of the church, and the pastor came over to me and asked me what I needed prayer for. And I just said, I'm done running. And I prayed that night and I said, God, I will go wherever you want me to go, and I will do whatever you want me to do. And I promise I will serve you with the rest of my life. I promise. And I won't, this isn't one of those, get me out of this, God. And I was like, I knew in my spirit, like this promise was real. And the one thing I'm requesting of you is you have to make it plain. I don't know where to go anymore. I don't know how to do this anymore. I've tried so many times and I don't know how. It's not going to happen my way. It's going to happen yours. And you need to make it plain. So I left there that night knowing that I needed a long-term faith-based recovery program. And I didn't even know how to find that. I had no idea. And I didn't have insurance. I didn't have anything. So it's not like these things are readily available. So I started doing some research, couldn't find anything. I reached out to one girlfriend I had left, and we were very loosely connected and associated through social media. But I had gone through middle school, high school, and Bible college with her, and she was in women's ministry in Indianapolis. So, mind you, I lived in New York. That's where I'm from, born and raised. So I called her, and it was very humbling. And I said, "Hey, this is what I need, and I don't know how to find it. And I just thought maybe you would know of something." And she said, "Well, as a matter of fact, there's a program here in Indy. I'm really good friends with the director. I can make some phone calls." So this was the middle of July, actually, very beginning of July 2016. And she said, "Let me make some phone calls. I'll call you right back." She calls me back a little while later, and she said, "They're doing open interviews August 1st. If you can get here by then, we can get you in. I think we can get you in." And I started crying, and she's like, "What's the matter?" I said, "I won't be alive by then." I did not have 3 weeks left. And she said, "Well, you know what?" And this is crazy. I had not seen this girl since 2001. And she knew the position I was in because I was telling her. And she's, in a very affluent neighborhood, married with kids, young kids. And she said, "My husband's leaving Monday on a business trip. If you can get here, and he's going to be gone for 2 weeks. If you can get here, you can stay with me for 2 weeks. And then we can try to get you in." That was only God, because even at this stage in my life today, I don't know that I would open my home to somebody like me in the situation and the way I was, especially with young ones, right? Well, the very little bit that I had left, I sold so I could buy a plane ticket. I bought a one-way ticket to Indiana. No idea where I was going. I didn't even know I knew nothing. I was so strung out. Now, I will say, for that week that I was like, about a week from that phone call to me leaving, it was 6 days. I was blacked out that whole time. I was like,
Did had you ever been to Indianapolis before?
no, no,
Wow.
no. I didn't even really know where it was. So I was like, um, so I got there, and I mean, I'm surprised they even let me on the plane, to be honest. I don't know if I had a connector. I don't There's so much as a blur during that period of time. I got there, I detoxed at her house. She doesn't really know. She knows more about addiction at this point than she did then, because she ended up working at Wheeler where I went. But at that point, I don't think she knew what detox looked like. I'm like literally detoxing, like awful. And she's just excited to see her friend again. And she wants to run all over and do all these things. And I'm like literally trying not to die. And, but also still trying to perform. Right. And so it was a crazy couple of weeks, but I kept saying, "Hey, can you take me by the place that we're going to go?" I knew nothing about it. I just knew it was free. And she was like, "Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there." Now she lives in Avon, and, "We'll get there. We'll get there." And she wouldn't take me there. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? So finally, the day that it is for me to go for my interview, she takes me. She's like, "Pack up everything, because if they take you in, they're going to take you in today." I'm like, "Okay." It's a homeless shelter. And that's where I was going to live for the next 8 months. And I was like, and they still laugh to this day of this bougie New York girl coming in with her luggage to a homeless shelter. And I'm like, there's been some mistake. It's funny. It's like, now it's kind of laughable. It's like almost something out of a movie. And I texted somebody, and I said, "I think there's been a mistake, because she dropped me off at a homeless shelter." And he said, "Oh, you're not going to stay, are you?" And I was like, "You know what? Bet." And 4 hours later, I knew I was home. Like 4 hours later, I was sitting on the 7th floor of that homeless shelter with the other women in this long-term faith-based recovery program, and I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And that's where I was able to start unbecoming.
Uh, that's a lot. Most people assume that's where the story ends. You made it out. You got yourself checked in. You got through the program. But the awesome thing about this interview is it's not where your story ends. It's where it starts beginning. You climb out, you build the career, you get the titles, you start seeing success. Did you feel like the successes that you started here? You've been on this train wreck that you just described and have all the feels, have goosebumps and emotions, and hearing that story. And now you dig yourself out, with the help of others and all the things, and you build the success. But did that success heal what was created the problems?
No, no, not even close.
How did you discover that achievement um, can become another form of hiding, another form of addiction?
It was almost like being a child again, where I was just being praised. Like when you pull yourself up out of that situation. And I'll say this to any male or female who is pulling themselves up out of that, you should be praised. That is like addiction of any sort is horrible to go through. And if you are able to get yourself up and out of that, good for you. And like I salute you, I applaud you. However, then there was this deep desire in me because it is part of who I am at the core that I wanted to prove everyone wrong, that all I ever will be is an addict, and that I had peaked as a child, and that I wasn't, that this was now going to be the stigma that I live with forever. And I wanted to prove that I was capable of big things. And that came through, I would say, I started to climb a ladder, like you said, and titles started to really matter to me. So sometimes I would find myself compromising myself for a title.
It's incredible, incredible that we're having this conversation. What we're talking about right this minute, and the title of our podcast is Addicted to Betterment. Because I feel like people like myself and like you, and I share a lot of those characteristics. Often we trade one addiction for another. It may not be drugs. It could be achievement. It could be affirmations. It could be validation, as you described, improving ourselves. And for us, we are building a community of people who say, hey, I'm addicted. I'm addicted to getting better every day. And whatever that looks like. And sometimes it means I'm becoming, not becoming, So, man, this is the heart. This is the heart of who we are. It's the heart of who we're talking to. It's the heart of people in our world today, Jennifer. I feel like most of our friends are feeling or experiencing some sort of what you're describing right now. Maybe not to the level of living at the seventh floor of Wheeler Mission downtown, which, as you said, it because I'm so familiar with that area and that facility, it hits close to home and it's incredible. But thank you for sharing all that with me and our friends. But why the word unbecoming? I mean, if I'm being honest and be a little critical, what my first instinct would be is you just shared this train wreck. You just shared all the things. To me, I'm like, oh, this is going to be inspirational. It's going to be becoming. I'm becoming this person. And you flip the script and say it's unbecoming. Tell me more. Why?
Because I think Jesus did that a lot in his ministry, right? Is like this constant unbecoming of, like I said, I deconstructed my faith for 20 years and I came back into such a deep and heartfelt relationship with Jesus through this whole journey. And so at this point in my life, all I care about is that my life points others to Jesus. Now, you're going to find your own path. Once if I can introduce you to him, like if you look at me and you see Jesus and somehow you're guided toward him, then my job is done. Now it's his job. You guys are going to grow in your own personal relationship from there. That's not up to me, and I want no part of that, to be honest. But I think that his universe is an upside down one, and there's so many times that I'm so inclined to build my own empire when really my whole purpose in life is to build the kingdom. And so I and over the last almost 10 years now, next month will be 10 years since I started that program. I was in the shelter for 2 years, came out, so it's been 8 years of living on my own, 10 years of sobriety. I started to really like the job mattered to me, the title mattered to me, and there was times that I found myself again compromising. And it's something that my husband has pointed out to me over the last few years. Sometimes you don't even recognize it in yourself, but I still am inclined to find my value and my worth in the approval of others. And over this last year, I would say this last year was a really pivotal one for me personally in our marriage. We've been married for going on 6 years now. And so this last year was really like a game changer. And I started to realize from my husband telling me that, like, you still seek the approval of other people's voices. And I always end up working for men. That's just the way it is, right? So keep climbing to the top. But there I always have a male boss who's somehow telling me who I am and who I'm not, and exactly how far I can push it. And it does something to me. It leaves me empty again and undone and feeling not worthy and not worth it. And I find myself compromising all these things that I know are true and all this work that I have done to build myself up in my identity in Jesus. But then I'm like, I know who I am, but I need you to approve me. I know who I am, but I need your seal of approval for me to actually believe it or to think that I'm capable of these good things. David's been pushing me to write. I mean, I've always been a writer. He's been pushing me to publish since the day we met. And I'm always like, no, I'm not good enough. No, I'm not good enough. No, it's not the right time. No, it's not this. No, it's not that. And like that drives him crazy, right? Because he's like, you have books in you. Why are you not doing this? But I'm like waiting for somebody to give me permission to do it. And over the last year, through some things in our marriage, I started to realize that I was still like living, there were still parts of me that needed to unbecome. I was still living for some appearances. And there's times I wanted to be my husband's Holy Spirit instead of letting God be his Holy Spirit, letting the Holy Spirit be his Holy Spirit. And I couldn't even see that in myself. And I was finally forced to see it and recognize like, I don't like it when other people do that to me, yet that's the person that I'm becoming because of the journey that I've been on with God. I feel like that's a journey everybody needs to be on. And the way I believe is the way everybody needs to. And none of that is true. And I realized about a little over a year and a half ago, I took a position as an executive director. And so it's like kind of like you have become, right? Like this huge organization, very well known in Georgia and great salary. I mean, great, everything that you're like, okay, I have made it. And I found myself in the same position of seeking approval and being inauthentic and censoring myself to say and do and be what somebody else was telling me I needed to be. And it really it took a huge toll on me over this last year. And I finally was like, no, no, like this isn't who God created me to be. Why am I doing this? Like, why? I've done the hard work to unbecome all of the things that I once thought I was for God to show me who I truly am, yet I'm putting myself in this position again. And what I realized was as long as we are having a human experience, we are always going to have to be unbecoming because people are always going to be putting expectations on us and telling us who we should be and who we shouldn't be and what we should say and what we should do and what we have to be careful of. Like a specific term that was said to me was be careful what hill you choose to die on. And I think that was the point where I was like, you know what? I get to choose what hills I'm going to die on. You don't.
So I want to pause you right there. This is so interesting because I was just reflecting as you were sharing, I got a executive director job in a big company and we're connected on social media and I remember seeing, your celebrations on this and, knowing your story. I'm over here celebrating you. Oh, way to go. Good job, man. And what I'm reading as I scrolled through your journal and the reason why it jumped out at me when, your story giving me and Nikki all the feels, right? It's like, way to go, Jennifer, killing it, and King David, all the things. And by the way, side note, I try to get some of my friends to call me King David. I haven't got any of them to do it yet. So I'm working on that. But anyway, so then when you release something called Unbecoming, it's like, wait, I'm just celebrating your story of climbing this, it's like, way to go. And as you were talking, I thought, man, it resonates that one of the strongest themes I saw in the journal was validation, the addiction of validation. And I have seen it in my own life. I remember when I would be addicted to that, that approval of great job. And you just kept trying to perform bigger and higher and do something more because it was just like, wow, great job. So I understand that. And I think of how destructive that addiction is. And I have two questions, kind of straightforward, maybe a little personal, but how is the addiction to a validation or approval similar to the addiction to substance?
You find your value and your worth in it. So with a substance, you can tap out, right? Like addicted to drugs and alcohol, I could stop facing who I really was, who I was at the core. When you are being validated and approved by people, you still don't have to look at who you are at the core, because as long as they're saying you're okay, you don't have to take yourself back to that mirror and say, am I really okay?
Which is harder to quit, alcohol or needing everyone to like you?
Alcohol for sure. I mean, you know, 10 years in of sobriety, it's still, there's days that are tough. Like you still want, but this is why. This is why. See, it's a good question because it's not tough not to drink. Again, society thinks you're weird if you don't. So the times I want to drink, it's because I want to fit in. I actually don't crave that feeling being out of control. I don't crave being out of my right mind. I don't like. I actually like being in my right mind. I kind of like it here, and it's crazy, and there's like a ton that goes on up here, but I've learned that I really love it. I hate not feeling like other people. I hate feeling like I'm different sometimes. And so, yes, alcohol has been much easier to quit than validation and approval.
We're getting near the end here, but there's a couple things I want to touch on. There was a phrase in the journal that jumped out at me, and it said, rebuilding the woman beneath the ruins. And that phrase, I love that phrase. The woman beneath the ruins. What does that mean?
Because when you get to be the ripe old age of 51, you realize there was always the person you were created to be somewhere still in there. But you have to dig through the ruins to find her.
So, Jennifer, the woman that's listening to this right now, the woman sitting in the car, the woman that's struggling, the one that's hiding, the one that is pretending that she is okay. If you could sit across from her right now, what would you tell her?
You got to get honest. Before you can do anything else, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, is the life that you're living today the life that you can see yourself living forever? And are you giving yourself a fair shot at your best forever? And what I've realized today is that the more authentically I choose to live, the more I have to offer to the people around me. And the people who don't value who I am authentically are not my people. So I don't need to try to please them. So I know there's a lot to be afraid of. It's not easy. Like, most people aren't going to check themselves into a homeless shelter for 2 years and tap out. And there's some people who, for whatever reason, they don't have the ability to do that. You don't have to hit rock bottom in drugs or alcohol. I would say if you figure out that the life that you are living, if you're even listening this long in this podcast, you already know, right? Like we're already there. If you've listened this long, this hit something in you. And so now, like, what are you going to do about it? You have to get vulnerable. You've got to, first of all, find somebody to talk to. I'm not here to sell my journal, I promise that, but it is a great place to start because it's where I started. It's where I started to release all of that stuff that was put on me so that I could then, start to rebuild. And so that's what I would say to her is I would say, like, it's okay to be honest with yourself and it's scary, but I promise what's on the other side of it is so worth it.
I'm about to plug the journal for you. So I want to tell people in a second where to find your journal, where to buy it, what to expect. But before I do, I can't help but ask, your story moves me. You inspire me. When your story's all said and done, Jennifer, and it's still evolving, what do you hope that women who have been along for your journey or part of some part of your journey, what do you hope that they remember about Jennifer Wilkins?
That no matter how hard it got, I'd never quit.
Well, friends, today's episode wasn't really about addiction. It wasn't really even about homelessness or corporate success. It was about identity. At the end of the day, today's episode was about identity because somewhere along the way, many of us, we perform in order to survive. And eventually we wake up exhausted. We wake up exhausted. And as my friend Jennifer said, empty. Reach out, get our journal. Jennifer, where can they find your journal? Where can they pick those up at?
It's on Amazon.
Amazon. It's called Unbecoming.
Yep.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
I can promise you, knowing Jennifer personally, you won't regret it. I've had the luxury of reading through it. It challenged me, inspired me, and my life is better because I got to read that journal. And my hope is that our friends who listen to this today, their life is better because they got to hear from you. Jennifer, thank you so much for being honest, and thank you for never giving up.
Thank you. Thank you. This is great.
So, you just listened to this episode. Now, join us in being addicted to betterment. Please subscribe to the show, share with your friends, tag us, and please take a moment, leave a review. Yeah, we do want your stars, but we really want the feedback.